One sunny afternoon, as the golden rays of the setting sun filtered through the trees, a billionaire named Alexander Stone found himself strolling through a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. Known for his vast fortune, luxury cars, and a life of grandeur, Alexander rarely had moments to himself. He was always surrounded by business deals, private jets, and the demands of a high-profile life. However, on this particular day, something different happened, a moment of fate that would change not only his life but the lives of others. As Alexander walked along the park's winding path, he noticed something unusual out of the corner of his eye. A faint rustling noise came from a secluded bench near the edge of the park. Intrigued, he approached, only to find a shocking sight: a young woman, unconscious, slumped over with 3 small children huddled around her. The children, no older than 5 or 6 years old, were trying to wake her, shaking her gently, their faces filled with worry. The moment was surreal. The woman, appearing exhausted and pale, had obviously been in some kind of distress. The children, despite their tender age, showed a level of concern that one would expect from someone much older. One of the children, a little girl with a pigtail, looked up at Alexander, her wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. In a state of shock, Alexander immediately knelt beside the woman. His experience in the high-stakes world of business had not prepared him for a situation like this. He reached for his phone, dialing the emergency services without hesitation. The dispatcher on the other end of the line was quick to respond, advising Alexander to stay with the woman and children until help arrived. "Is she going to be okay?" the little boy asked softly, his voice trembling. Alexander paused for a moment, unsure of how to answer. He had no medical expertise, but he knew that the situation was serious. The woman appeared to be in a deep, unnatural sleep, and the children were clearly distressed. The uncertainty of the situation gnawed him. He reassured the child the best he could, though inside, he was filled with an overwhelming sense of urgency. After what felt like an eternity, an ambulance finally arrived. Paramedics rushed to the scene, quickly assessing the woman's condition. Alexander stepped back, watching as they carefully placed her onto a stretcher. The children, however, were not allowed to go with her. They remained behind, standing together, holding hands tightly, with their eyes fixated on their mother. The paramedics advised Alexander to take care of the children, as the woman would need immediate medical attention. The children were clearly scared, their tiny bodies trembling with anxiety. Without hesitation, Alexander took charge of the situation. His wealth and status had not prepared him for moments like this, but his instincts kicked in. He gently guided the children to the nearby bench, offering them comfort and reassurance. With the ambulance speeding away, Alexander was left alone with the 3 children. His mind raced. He was not a father, and he had no idea how to care for children. Yet, in that moment, he realized that it wasn't about experience or expertise. It was about being there for them when they needed someone the most. One of the children, the little girl, tugged at his sleeve. "Where is Mommy? Will she be okay?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. Alexander tried to find the right words, though none seemed sufficient. "She'll be okay," he said softly. "The doctors will help her. Right now, we need to stay strong for her." The boy, still wide-eyed, nodded but said nothing. It was clear that they had been through something traumatic, and words alone couldn't provide the comfort they needed. However, Alexander was determined to make them feel safe. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility to protect these children, even if just for the time being. As they sat together on the bench, Alexander couldn't help but think about the circumstances that had brought them all here. Why was the woman unconscious in the park with her children? Who was she? What had happened? His mind raced with questions, but he knew there was little he could do to answer them in that moment. What mattered now was taking care of the children and ensuring they were safe. After a few minutes, Alexander pulled out his phone and called his personal assistant, requesting that a car be sent to the park immediately. The children, though exhausted and frightened, seemed to take some comfort in his calm demeanor. It was as if, in that moment, he was the steady anchor they needed in a sea of confusion and fear. As the car arrived, Alexander gently ushered the children inside. He made sure they were all buckled into their seats, and with a final glance at the park, he instructed the driver to take them to his private estate, a grand villa tucked away in the hills, far from the noise and chaos of the city. The journey was quiet, with only the soft hum of the engine filling the air. The children remained mostly silent, their eyes occasionally glancing at Alexander. He glanced back at them, offering a soft smile, but he knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The children needed answers, and they needed care, things he wasn't sure how to provide, given his lack of experience with children. But he was determined to do everything in his power to make sure they felt safe and cared for. Arriving at the villa, Alexander escorted the children inside. The sprawling estate, with its marble floors and grand chandeliers, felt like another world compared to the park. Yet, for these children, it was a sanctuary, a place where they could rest, recover, and begin to heal from the trauma they had just experienced. The house staff, who had seen their fair share of unusual requests from their employer, were more than willing to help. They quickly prepared rooms for the children and made sure they were comfortable. Alexander, meanwhile, couldn't help but wonder about the woman, their mother. What had brought her to this point? Was there something he could do to help her once she recovered? Over the following days, Alexander did his best to provide for the children. They spent their time in the villa, playing with toys, watching movies, and, most importantly, resting. But Alexander knew that the emotional recovery would take much longer than any of the children could imagine. The trauma they had experienced would leave a lasting impact on them. It wasn't just about providing food and shelter, it was about offering them emotional security, a sense of normalcy in a world that had been upended. Meanwhile, Alexander kept in touch with the hospital, receiving regular updates about the mother's condition. It turned out that she had suffered from a sudden, severe allergic reaction, which had caused her to lose consciousness. Fortunately, she was expected to make a full recovery, but the road to healing would be long. The doctors were doing everything they could to stabilize her, but she would need to stay in the hospital for some time. When the day finally came for the mother to return, Alexander was there, waiting with the children at the hospital. As soon as they saw her, the children rushed to her side, their faces lighting up with joy and relief. The mother, though weak and weary, embraced her children tightly, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "I can't believe you're all okay," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Alexander stood off to the side, watching the reunion with a mix of relief and admiration. He had helped these children in their time of need, but now, they were going to be okay. The bond between mother and child was unbreakable, and seeing it restored was a reminder of the power of family and love. The woman turned to Alexander, her expression filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us," she said softly. Alexander gave a modest smile. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone would do in my place." But deep down, Alexander knew that the experience had changed him. He had always been a man of business, focused on profit and success. Yet, in helping this woman and her children, he had discovered something far more important: compassion. It was a quality he had overlooked in his pursuit of wealth, but one that would stay with him forever. As the family left the hospital, Alexander knew that his life would never be the same. He had found a new sense of purpose, one that wasn't tied to money or power, but to making a real difference in the lives of others. And that, perhaps, was the greatest wealth of all.